Welcome to NFCC's Guide Through the Seasons of Mental Wellness. I'm your host, Anna Crain, a licensed social worker and outreach counselor at Nick Finnegan Counseling Center here in Houston, Texas. I'm so glad for you to join us for Season 3, where we talk about all things healing. Let's get into today's episode. Clorena Myles is a breast cancer survivor, mom of 3, wife, teacher, and yogi. After being diagnosed with breast cancer, she decided to open up and share her journey with the world. She was extremely transparent with the different stages of her breast cancer diagnosis, sharing things like losing all of her hair, chemotherapy side effects, and the mental trauma of cancer. She also wanted to ensure that other young African American women could see themselves represented in the fight against breast cancer. African American women are 40% more likely to die from breast cancer than their white counterparts. This statistic makes it even more important for Black women to be able to connect and share their stories with one another. She has used the last 2.5 years since her diagnosis to redefine the meaning of life. She is focused on the now and making new memories with her family. Where she once shared many of the lows of being diagnosed with cancer, she now focuses on sharing the highs of the life after cancer. We're so excited for you to learn from Clorena today and hear her story. Let's get into it. Welcome, Clorena. I'm so excited to have you here with us today and for these listeners to get to know you. You're such a joy, and I'm so excited for them to hear your story. So let's start out by telling our listeners about you and your story of healing from your cancer diagnosis.
So it was a long process. When I got done with treatment 3 months later, I was pregnant. And so it was kind of like a whirlwind of pausing healing to start growing a baby. And so I feel like I didn't actually start healing until a year later, once I had the baby. And then I was like, oh, shoot, like, this is what this feels like to like be on the other side, have my own body and everything. But the biggest thing I found is that it's harder on the other side than when you're in treatment. Like when you're in treatment, it's like that fight mode. You're like, I'm fighting this. And you know that you're killing it. Like, you know that your body and the like medicines are working to cure the disease. But then when you're on the other side, you're kind of just like, wait, now there's no medicine helping me to like kill this disease. My body has let this disease grow before. Could my body be letting it grow now?
Yeah.
So I think just being on the other side, it is much more, you have to be much more intentional about like where you allow your mind to focus.
I love the idea of intentionality, but behind where it's almost this like mindfulness practice. I know that you're a big yogi and you believe in mindfulness. Talk about that. Talk about how you use that during your healing and even during treatment.
Just trying to stay like, one of my friends said something like the day I got diagnosed, or like 2 days later, and she was like, tell me if this is stupid. Tell me to shut up if you like are like, no, Clorena. And she was like, I know we could think about all the bad things, but what if we just thought about what's the best that can happen?
Yeah.
And like when she said it, I was like, okay, all right, like let me sit in that, like, right, because at that point my mind was going to all of the worst things. Like I had already, like, if I'm being frank, I'd already died. I'd already figured out like how my kids were going to be without me, like my husband, like I was already there. And so she's like, what's the best that can happen? And that, even to this day, I'm like, all right, Clorena, what's the best you can get out of this? Like, and like some people are like, oh, like, what is it? Toxic positivity. And I'm like, no, that's just how I work. Like, I'm just looking for the best possible thing. Prior to this, all my life, and kind of like my dad just ingrained in us this kind of like, prepare for the worst. And so all my life, I've kind of always prepared I was over prepared for everything. I was ready for the worst. So if the worst happened, I didn't feel and I'm like, no, like I'm gonna stop living like that now. I'm gonna start preparing for the best and just seeing what happens. And so I think that little saying was able to like keep me like, all right, Clorena. And sometimes I'm not like, what's the best that can happen? But I'm just like, all right, everything does not have to be for bad. Like, what could go right in this? So
yeah, well, that's like a funny thing, knowing you and knowing how you just exude positivity. I feel like the idea of you kind of going in seems like so crazy to me, and I feel like that is what people do when they hear cancer. I feel like, like there's this like level of just, I am now, like what you said, I'm dead. And I feel like that's so scary. And it's so scary for the people around you who love you and want to support you. So when you heard the C word, what was your response and how did people around you respond?
Initially, I was just, it was like when my doctor was on the phone with me because she called and she wanted me to come in for an appointment. And I was just like, nah, like I can already see where this is going. Like this isn't good news. And I was like, I'd rather be in the comfort of my home. And so when she said it, I just looked at I had my phone on speakerphone and me and my husband kind of just like looked at each other. And then I don't know what she said after that. Like bits and pieces of her conversation, I remember, but I kind of was just sitting there, just like crying. And my husband's like, you're going to be all right. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, bro, people die from cancer. Like, this is this is the one thing you don't want to get in life. Like anything else you can kind of figure out.
Yeah.
And so, and then, you get the movie image of cancer, right? So like, I immediately went to like the movie image of what it would be like to have cancer, like the bald head and then being sick all the time and people, treating you like you were already dead and then you get better and then you die later. And so it was like, I had like this whole image. I think my husband kind of like was just in shock. And I think he just like his immediate reaction was just like, comfort me.
Yeah.
My kids were so young that like we didn't tell our kids. Like we just said mommy was sick. But
how old were your kids again? I mean,
Zara was turning 1, so she hadn't turned 1 yet, and Phoenix was 2 or 3. So Phoenix was 3.
So little, yeah.
They were so little that they didn't. My sister had already gone through cancer, so I talked to her a lot when I got diagnosed. And I talked to my dad. Like those were like, so I talked to those people a lot. And it was weird because like people I hadn't talked to in a very long time or like not much, when I said I had cancer, they all like reached out. But then it was interesting because after that first reach out, none of them reached out again.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like what you just said, I feel like is so important. It's like you are almost going through this interesting grief process when you're still living. Right. It's that like process of the loss of what would be and what could be. And I think people don't know how to respond because they hear the word cancer. And I know this, from my own personal experience and from my, my mom, and I have lots of family members. And I feel like so often people, it's almost like this fight or flight response to cancer. And then you have to manage other people's response to you.
Yep.
And how hard that is to feel like I'm managing someone else's grief around like their brother's sister's dog's dad had cancer once. And now they're really sad when they're talking to me about my experience. Did you feel like that?
Or they're like, yeah, I lost my grandmother to cancer. And I'm like, not what I need to hear right now. Like, I'm so sorry about your grandma. Like,
yeah,
like, not right now. Like, or they're like, I totally understand what you're going through because I've lost people to cancer. And I'm like, so wait, I'm about to die? Like, wait, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not dead yet. You didn't lose me. But
yeah. Like, I'm still here. I'm present. I'm talking to you right now.
But it is, but I mean, I can only imagine that is hard for people because before I went through it, like the amount of empathy and the amount of just like watching what I say to people or the questions that I ask or whatever, it's totally different now that I've been on the other side. So I am like 1000% experience is the best teacher because without it, you just don't know how to respond. You just don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. Experience is the best teacher. I feel like I would say that that's like overwhelmingly true in life. And I love the concept of like growing in your empathy, right? I bet that was probably a part of your healing because you're dealing with the people who respond around you. Did you feel like you wanted a large group of people to know about this, or did you feel like you needed to keep it very like insular?
When I found out, because I am a very like I handle things on my own type person. Like I don't prior to this, don't ask for help. I handle it. Like I am a very like private person. And so when I told my husband that I wanted to share it, I was like, look, I can't have this conversation 15 different times.
Yes.
So honestly, like my sharing was kind of like a little bit of me being like selfish too, because I'm like, if I just put it out there for everybody to see, I'm not going to get all the one-off questions. Every conversation I have with somebody doesn't have to be so how's everything going? What happened last? Because people were just could watch it for themselves. So I could just give one update to a screen where I didn't have to have people like asking me a bunch of questions in the moment. People could sit on it, think about how they wanted to respond. And then when they asked me questions, they were a lot more purposeful. Like, and so just sharing it out, that one helped me. And then two, when I got diagnosed that night, I literally researched, like I went on Instagram and I just typed in like the hashtag like young Black cancer. I couldn't find nobody really. Like I couldn't find really anybody who looked like me. And so everyone that I found, I just followed them. Like I was just like, and then that kind of just made me think like when some woman Googles, I want them to find me. Like I want them to see me. And that's what happened. So I just kept sharing.
And I feel like that is like such a, I don't know, that is like such a pinpoint of exactly who you are and like the educator that you are and the woman that you are and the mother to, especially to daughters that you are, is like, I want to be a person who people can see, who people like me, who look like me, who act like me can see and know, hey, what's the best that can happen? Right? Like you are an example of that. And I heard you say like, this was a selfish version of this. I don't think that's selfish at all. Like that is not selfish. Yeah. You know, yeah, truly. I do hear you. And I've talked to other people and I know, you know, that's how a lot of people feel like maybe they find one friend and they tell everything to that friend. And then they're like, okay, you share my information. So I don't have to have that same conversation over and over again. But to put yourself out there into the world of Instagram like that and to potentially, you know, the world of scrutiny and to say, hey, you know what, this is my story and I want to help people with my story. Girlfriend, not selfish. Like not at all. So I think that, you know, that's really huge. And did you feel like once you started to share, did you feel like, I know you've connected with a lot of people. Do you feel like that like has been healing for you?
Yeah, like definitely. Like, because I felt so alone. Like in the beginning, I felt like no one understands this. Like it was like conversations. I felt like I was working too hard to ever find someone who just like understood the sentiment. Like, and so once I found like people who were also affected by breast cancer, and I found people in the city or found people, you know, that weren't in the city, it was just easier conversation. Yeah. And so you could just talk without having to talk and explain.
Yes.
And so like, that was one of the things, like, even like my best friends, like, it was like, I got to do too much explaining for you to understand. And like, I just didn't pick up the phone to call those people because I was like, you got life going, you got everything. And so the community that I found of women who were like, yeah, I'm going through the same thing or had just been through it, it was just way more beneficial.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that concept of talking and having to explain something, I think is so hard. And I think that it is such a beautiful thing to be able, there's lots of bad things on the internet. Don't get me wrong. But there are lots of good things too that, you know, especially to like touch on that alone piece and feeling lonely. I would say it is a great place to connect with others, you know, and to know their stories and to feel like you can be in it. And like you said, right, talking without explaining. I think that that's so huge. And so how do you feel like you can get the cancer diagnosis and handle it mentally and then explain it to your family or not, or explain it to your loved ones or not? You know, how do you feel like all of that impacts your mental health?
girl, what? Like, I was like, see, this is the thing though. It doesn't impact you when, for me, I didn't feel like when I was going through the treatment, my mental health wasn't bad. Like when I was going through treatment, it was like I would look outside and be like, oh my God, that tree is so green. It is beautiful. Like you're just like, oh my God, the flowers. Like I've never seen flowers so bright because you're going through that kind of like, I'm just so happy to be able to be alive and fight it. Right. And so there's a bliss that comes in the time when you are going through treatment, especially with how many stages I had. Like I had the chemo, then I had the surgery, then I had radiation, then I had another surgery. And so with all of the stages, I felt like I never really had a chance to check on my mental health. And then when I did, it would be like, okay, right as I was going from one stage to another, that is when the hit would come where I'm like, all right, Clorena, like you got over one mountain, but now that there's another one in front of you, it was like this idea of like, I'm coming over the mountain. I worked so hard to get over it. I get to the bottom and I'm like, look up. I'm like, shit, there's another one. And then you're like, all right, I got over that mountain. Then you're like, and so it wasn't, because then you get so used to getting over the mountain that it wasn't until the end when there was no mountain in sight. And it was like, shit, you got to forge your own path. Like you get to choose whichever way you go. And that is when I crumbled. That is when like after treatment, after the doctors were like no longer being like, here's the next, that's when I crumbled. But 3 months later, I got pregnant. And so it was like, shut that off because you can't stress this baby out and you got to grow this baby.
Yeah.
And so the mental health honestly didn't hit until it hit right when I was done with treatment. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to die next time because if it come back, I'm dead. And then like,
I'm not meaning to laugh. I'm just like,
no, that's how you are. You like,
yeah.
Shit. And then I got pregnant. So it was like the journey just took, it was so stretched out.
And then after your beautiful son was born,
yes.
Do you feel like after that, then it was like, not only am I dealing with postpartum, I'm dealing with post-treatment, I'm dealing with my body changing in so many ways. I mean,
and then I had a major surgery 3 months after he was born. So it was just like a lot. I think that once he was born, I mean, he was the best baby that like, I think God was like, look, I know I kind of like threw a wrench in there. So I'm going to give you the best possible. And so he was the best possible baby, calm. And so I don't think I went through any like postpartum with him because he was just so peaceful. And so I would like look to him for peace. Like, I'm just like, wow, you are so peaceful. Like you went through so much to get here and look how peaceful you are. And so he helped. I think that in the beginning though, when I first had him, it wasn't postpartum depression, but I went through a stage where I was just like, how selfish am I to bring this new baby into the world and possibly not even raise him?
Oh, it's okay.
So I think that was like one of my biggest things is when I had him. It wasn't like postpartum from him, but it was just like, you brought another kid into the world and you don't even know how long you have in this world. And so I think I went through that when I first had him really bad.
Yeah.
But then after that,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Not as much. So, but I also went to counseling.
Yeah.
And like, I was just like, when they diagnose you with cancer, they should tell you there's 4 stages of this. There's chemo, there's surgery, there's radiation, and then there is mental health. Like there is like some type of therapy.
Yes.
So yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like it's so hard to even rehash some of this stuff sometimes. And I so appreciate you sitting in this space with me, but, and with anyone who's listening, because I think that we hear these stories and people are just like, wow, they're so strong.
Yeah.
They don't know the whole thing, and I think that it's important to show all sides of this. And I just, something else that's, I feel like is so important too, is you being able to share that you have, gone through and done the work, because I think that it's this, there's so much stigma around mental health services. And especially I feel like in the Black community, there's just this, like, that's not how we handle it. And for you to be able to share that is so beautiful. And I really appreciate it because, it's hard.
Yeah, it is. Especially after treatment. Like that's the number one thing I tell people who's like, how can I support somebody? And I'm like, be there for them after treatment. Like that space is no man's land. And most people get dropped in that space because everybody's like, you beat it, like you're good. And people immediately expect you to go back to who you were before you heard the words you have cancer. And it's like
possible.
Yeah, it's like I'll never be her again. Like I am a whole new moving forward. And like I think that's the biggest thing is like letting people know not to drop the people you care about in that space.
Yeah. So can you talk about that? Because I feel like talking about how people, we've all been impacted by cancer in the way of like, we know someone that we love and we love someone who has experienced cancer or we've lost someone to cancer. So what would you say that you recommend for someone kind of through all of those stages, like how to support someone you love through all of those stages from the moment that they hear and they share with you through all of the different treatments to, that no man's land piece, because I hear you. And I think you're so right. People are like, oh, remission. Cool. You're good. Bye. Like, come on, you ready to go do this thing again? Yeah. So kind of talk through that. Like, how can you support someone, or do you feel like is a good way to support someone through those stages?
The first stage is just like when they first find out, just listen. Like, don't try to offer. There aren't any words really you can offer that change it except for I'm listening to you. Like I hear you. Like talk, scream. Like I remember one of my friends was like, if you just need to scream, just scream. Like, and so in the beginning, just like listen throughout. Like when I say also sharing my story, so many people reached out to help me. Like a community popped up that I was just like, whoa. Even from like the things like, the flowers, and then the people who stepped in and were like, hey, we have a place of reprieve for you and your family. Like, I mean, people stepped in so much so. And sometimes I was like overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
Especially the question of like, how can I help you? Because you never know what someone's limit is to help. And so I found myself when people ask me that question, just being like, oh, I'm okay, just pray for me. When really I was like, I mean, I would really love a meal because like, yeah, there's 3 adults here, but I also have 2 little babies and my husband's still working full time. And so my mom trying to do the babies all day. And so like, actually, if you could send us dinner or like anything, but I don't know the extent to can that person, so then I'm in my mind, I'm going through, okay, who is the person? Do I think they can financially help? Are they a close enough friend to ask them for that? Like, and so I think it's being very specific on how you can help. So like being like, hey, I can send you $100 for groceries, or I can buy your family dinner tonight. Or, you know what I'm saying? Just being very specific. Like one of my friends was like, hey, get a house cleaner. I'll pay the house cleaner for the month. And so it was just like when people were specific during treatment, that was the best. And then after treatment, like in that no man's land, just being there, like just not trying to force that person to get back to a space. Yeah. Allowing them to be in the space that they're in at that time. And just remembering like, even if they're saying they're okay, that's the hardest time. Yeah. And so just still being there, like don't stop the calls during that time. I think that was a big thing, was like all the calls stopped. Like, and selfishly, you get kind of used to people like loving on you in a way. You're like, oh my God, people are so loving on me. And then you get finished and people are like, back to life, which is real because people got all of the situations, right? And so it's real. It's like, all right, we rally behind you. Now we got to go and so I would say just rally a little longer.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to summarize this and you tell me if you're wrong, if I'm wrong. Okay. Cause you're not wrong. I might be wrong. So in that first stage of like the diagnosis, the biggest thing I heard from you was just listen. Mm-hmm. In that second stage, throughout the process of treatment, whatever treatment looks like for that individual, that's specific offers, specific that are, hey, this is what my means allow. This is what I have to offer you. And whether that's hey, my family can take care of your family for this long on meals, or, hey, here's a place that you can go with your husband to relax, or, here's a spa treatment for you, or here's the maid, whatever the specific offer is that they are able to give, not letting you puzzle piece that, but them doing it. And then afterwards, I'm hearing presence and just meeting them where they are. Because we don't know what they're going through after treatment and what they've experienced, but meeting them where they are in that moment so that they can feel connected and feel like they understand, and, not understand, but feel closer to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I so appreciate that, because I feel like, even those 3 buckets feel like anyone can hear that and say, okay, I can do this. I can take from that bucket and give back and support and love on someone. So I really appreciate you doing that for me. So, okay. I know you said your kids were really young and y'all decided we're just going to share mommy's sick. Do you think that ever you're going to walk them through this stage of your life?
So that was also one of the reasons why I documented it so much, is because I was like, my kids can see it firsthand. So like they can see the videos, they can see the posts, they can read them. And so one of the things I was actually going to do is all of the posts that I made throughout that time, printing them out and creating a book.
Yeah.
And so, so it's like the book would be the different stages and just like what it really looks like to go through those stages. Cause that's when I was in it. Like trying to recount it now, would it be the same? Cause I'm not in it right now.
Right.
Like, and so just creating that for them to be able to like read through and see like how I was doing. I will eventually tell them. I think that right now, I haven't told them like mommy had cancer, just because when they go to school and they say that, kids' immediate reaction is my grandma died from cancer.
Yep.
My uncle died from cancer. My so-and-so, like that is just a child's immediate, because that is the connection they have to it.
Right. They
And so I'm like,
it with death. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I don't know that I want her to even have to live in those feelings that come with that. And like, wait, so my mommy gonna die? Like, you know what I'm saying? So I just like, I haven't, but I do walk her through like, mommy was sick. Mommy took medicine in order. So like, that's why mommy was bald. Cause she often talks about me having a bald head. And so I'm like, mommy was bald because the medicine that was saving my life, was that. And so I know that eventually, and that's why I don't know the right time, because I know that eventually when she says that to a kid, my mommy was bald, my mommy doesn't have her boobs, my mommy had medicine, they're going to be like, oh, your mom had cancer. Like,
Yeah.
So I don't want a kid to be the first one to tell her. I honestly just don't know the balance of here's when and so I guess I need to start thinking about that, because she's getting older and conversations like that are happening. So I just need to think about like, how am I going to walk her through it and let her know that when they say like, well, so-and-so died from cancer, it's like, yes, people can die from it, but people can die in car accidents and people can die in like swimming accidents. And, here are all the people that are in your life that are still living after they've been diagnosed with cancer. So you just made me actually think.
Well, first of all, I think you don't need to know the answer to that now, right? And I think time will tell. And having worked with so many kids, just as I'm a therapist that works with kids, I would tell you that every family is different and every story is different. And, even just like what you just said, right? Being prepared, if that is the way that she finds out, being prepared to talk about it. And I think that what you said is a great answer. I think, I remember my mom, when my mom was going through breast cancer, and Clorena and my mom have connected a lot over this, is like something that her motto was that Clorena's was what's the best that can happen. But my mom kept saying like, this isn't the thing that's going to kill me. I'm more likely, like, I'm not going to let this be the thing. This is not my thing. I don't want this to be my thing. And so, I think that that's you have such a beautiful motto that's coming from this, and using that to talk to your kids about it, I think is a really great way to move forward, right? Like, like you said, your dad prepared you for, preparing you for the worst, like be ready, you can also be ready for the best.
Yep.
and manifest that shit. I think that's great. Well, Clorena, I just like love you so much. I think that you are such a
Love you.
beautiful spirit and movement of a person. I feel like you could do truly, like, I know you were talking about climbing those mountains and coming down the bottom and being like, oh shit, I have to climb that again. Like watching you do this and just watching you exist. I mean, pre-cancer, post-cancer, like you're just a beautiful soul. And I'm so glad I got to talk to you. We
Thanks,
have
baby.
the rapid fire 5. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
Healing is
a journey. A journey.
Yes. If you could read one book on repeat, what would it be?
Oh, Jesus.
It's okay. It can also be a magazine or watch a show. What if you could read or listen to one thing on repeat, what would it be?
I will watch Sweet Magnolias on repeat.
Oh my God, I love that about you. That's yes. Okay, I know you're like such a person who's moved by music. I never asked this, but what about listen to?
Oh, there's a song there's a song by guy, I forgot who it's by, but it's Why Not Me?
Okay. I'm going to look it up. I love it. Okay. The best version of self-care for you personally is?
Yoga.
Yoga. Yes, I knew that. I knew you would that. Mindfulness, baby. Okay. What's one thing that you are proud of?
My family.
Speak to that.
I mean, we've just been through so much, like my kids, my husband, and not just with cancer diagnosis, but like pregnancy loss, job loss, everything. And then when I just look at us, I'm like, damn, but we are killing it. Like my babies are killing it. They are growing. They are kind. My husband and me and his relationship is crazy strong. Just like, and so I just look at us and I go, there's nothing that can beat us.
Yes. Okay. One thing you are deeply grateful for.
One. Second chances.
Yes. Talked about that.
I mean, my whole life I feel like it's like a second chance. And just being able to go, like, to reflect. I feel like my biggest thing is like, what happened in a moment doesn't have to define what happens next. And so I'm very big on just like, even in like professional, personal, whatever, and just clarifying like, yo, this happened, but like, is that really where we're going from here? Or like, this happened and we're going to talk about it and we're going to go somewhere totally different. It's going to be great. And so I think I operate in that in like my personal and like in my professional life. It's just like, this happened. We got 2 places we can go, but like, let's just see what the second chance looks like.
Yeah. And that shows a lot about who you are and the grace and the patience that you're willing to give others and the grace and the patience that you're willing to give yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're just such an intentional person. And I'm so excited for these people to get to know you. And I'd love for them to be able to connect with you. Either I know that your Instagram is such a place that, you are so open and so willing and so encouraging to all people, regardless if they've had a cancer diagnosis or if they're just a mom and they need, some mom advice or mom tips or thrifting. Clorena is an amazing thrifter. So where can people connect with you? How can people connect with you?
I'm only on Instagram, and that's at mama _likes_ a deal. So yeah, that's what it is. It's mama_likes_ a deal.
Yes. And It is such a happy place on the internet. It really is. So I really encourage all of y'all to go and check her out and get to know Clorena because, like I said, beautiful soul, beautiful person, and really, truly the most beautiful family. I just like all of your children are precious. You and your husband are just both like absolute dreams. And I'm just, everyone go follow her and check her out and get to know her. And thanks again. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us reach more listeners, please share it with someone you know, post about it on social media, and leave a rating or a review. To see what's coming next, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Nick Finn Counsel or visit our website at finnegancounseling.org. Before I go, I'd also like to thank the people who made this project possible. My wonderful friends and guest experts who joined me each episode, our production team at 3 Wire Creative, our editor, Giselle Dixon, and the amazing leadership team and supporters at Nick Finnegan Counseling Center in Houston, Texas. Until next time.